Theodore Whitfield was 47 years old, and until that Tuesday morning, he believed he had a good marriage. He owned a flooring business he'd built from nothing. His wife, Bernadette, was a respected real estate agent, polished, successful, the kind of woman people admired at dinner parties. He'd never once doubted her. They were at the bank that morning, refinancing their home, when Bernadette stepped away to take a call. That's when the teller leaned across the counter and whispered 4 words that stopped Theo cold. "Don't trust your wife." He said nothing. Bernadette returned, arms crossed, suspicious of the wrong person entirely. 3 days later, sitting alone in his truck in that same parking lot, Theo opened a bank statement she never knew he could access. A hidden account. 3 years of deposits. Money she'd been quietly building behind his back. What Theo did next would unravel everything Bernadette thought she'd gotten away with. But in that frozen moment, staring at numbers that shouldn't exist, he made a decision she'd never see coming. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The binder sat on the back seat of Theo's truck, like it had always belonged there. Navy blue, 3 inches thick, with tabbed dividers sorted by category. Mortgage statements, business profit summaries, tax returns going back 5 years, 2 forms of ID, and a certified letter from his accountant confirming liquid assets. Theo had spent 2 evenings putting it together at the kitchen table, while Bernie watched television in the next room. He hadn't told her what it was for. That was the point. 19 years of marriage, and he still knew how to surprise her. He merged onto Route 9 and glanced at her in the passenger seat. Bernie was beautiful, the way a lobby is beautiful. Everything placed with intention. Her silk blouse was pressed without a single crease. Her earrings matched her watch. Her nails were the color of wet clay, fresh from yesterday's appointment. She was scrolling through her phone with one hand and resting the other on the window ledge, and she looked the way she always looked when she was in public, or about to be. Composed. Ready. "You look nice," Theo said. She glanced up and smiled, the kind of smile that came fast and landed easy. "You say that every time we go somewhere." "I mean it every time." She laughed softly and went back to her phone. That was them. 19 years, and it still looked like that from the outside. Easy, warm, the kind of couple that made other couples feel like they were doing something wrong. Theo knew that's what people saw. Bernie's co-workers said it at office parties. The neighbors said it over backyard fences. "You two make it look simple." Theo kept his eyes on the road. He had built his flooring business from a single used tile saw and a second-hand van after a layoff at 31. He had run the books himself for 15 years, learned to read a balance sheet the way a doctor reads a chart, calm and without flinching. People looked at his calloused hands and his quiet way of speaking and decided he was the kind of man who didn't think too deeply about things. He had never corrected them. First Commonwealth Bank sat on the corner of Aldine and 4th, a clean brick building with glass doors and a row of customer parking out front. Theo pulled in, cut the engine, and reached back for the binder. Bernie was already checking her reflection in the visor mirror. "You really brought a whole binder," she said. "I always bring documentation." "To the bank." "Especially to the bank." She shook her head, but she was smiling. He held the door open for her, and she walked in ahead of him, shoulders back, heels quiet on the marble floor. The branch was not busy. A security guard stood near the entrance. 2 tellers were working the counter. The one on the left was helping an older man with a deposit. The one on the right looked up as they approached. A woman in her late 30s, dark skin, natural hair pulled back, reading glasses pushed up on her head. Her name tag read, Patrice. "Good afternoon," she said. "How can I help you?" Theo set the binder on the counter. "We're here to start the refinancing process on our home loan. Possibly early payoff, depending on the numbers. I called ahead. Spoke with someone named Davis? He's with another client. I can get you started." Patrice pulled up something on her screen, then looked at Bernie. "And your name?" "Bernadette Whitfield." Bernie's smile arrived on cue. "Same account." Patrice began typing. Her eyes moved across the screen in a way that was professional, routine. But she paused once, just briefly, in a way Theo noticed and filed away without showing. "I'll need to pull your joint statements going back 36 months, Theo said, "for the payoff calculation." Bernie's hand touched the counter. Not hard, just placed. "I can pull my own statements," she said. Her tone was still pleasant, but there was something underneath it, tightly wound. "I'll handle my side separately." Theo looked at her. "It's a joint account, Bernie." "I know what it is." She smiled at Patrice. "We just like to keep things organized. His side, my side." Patrice nodded without expression and continued typing. Then Bernie's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen, and her posture shifted. Subtle, almost invisible. But Theo had been watching her for 19 years. "I have to take this," she said. 2 minutes. She was already stepping back from the counter, turning toward the far wall, her voice dropping to something low and even as she answered. Theo watched her go. Then he turned back to the counter. Patrice was already looking at him. Not the way a teller looks at a customer. The way a person looks at another person when they've been waiting for a moment, and the moment has finally arrived. Her eyes moved once toward Bernie, still on the phone across the lobby, arms now crossed, back half-turned. Then Patrice leaned forward across the counter, close enough that her voice didn't have to travel far at all. "Don't trust your wife." 4 words, barely a breath. Theo didn't move. His face stayed still, his hands resting flat on the binder. He held her gaze for exactly 1 second, then looked back down at the paperwork on the counter. Bernie's heels clicked against the floor as she returned. Theo lay on his back in the dark and stared at the ceiling. Bernie was asleep beside him. He could hear her breathing, slow even, completely unbothered. One arm was folded under her pillow. Her silk sleep mask covered her eyes. She looked peaceful. She always looked. He did not move. The ceiling fan turned above him, slow and steady, pushing warm air around the room. The clock on the nightstand read 2:14. He had been awake since midnight. He would probably be awake until the alarm. "Don't trust your wife." He turned the words over in his mind, the same way he turned a problem over at a job site. Carefully, from every angle, without rushing to a conclusion. Patrice had said it in 4 words. No explanation, no hesitation. Not, "I think," or "maybe you should," or anything soft that could be brushed aside. Just the words, flat and clean, like a warning label. She hadn't looked scared. That bothered him more than anything. A person who was scared of getting caught says something like that with their eyes down, voice shaking. Patrice had looked at him the way a person looks at someone they've already decided deserves to know the truth. Steady, certain. Bernie shifted beside him, pulling the blanket a little tighter. Theo did not look at her. He kept his eyes on the ceiling. He thought about the way Bernie's hand had landed on the counter when he mentioned pulling joint statements, the way her posture had changed when the phone buzzed, the way she'd stepped back from the counter just a little too fast for a call that supposedly couldn't wait 2 minutes. He had noticed all of it. He had just chosen, at the time, to file it away. That was how he worked. That was always how he worked. He did not react. He gathered. He waited until the picture was clear before he said a word. He closed his eyes. He did not sleep. By 7 in the morning, he had a plan. He showered, dressed, and came downstairs to find Bernie at the kitchen counter with her coffee and her phone, already scrolling through listings. She was still in her robe, hair wrapped up, reading glasses on. She looked ordinary. She looked like his wife. "I have to run back to the bank," he said. He poured himself a cup and kept his voice easy. "Davis left a message last night. Says there's a follow-up document I need to sign before they can process the refinance request." Bernie looked up. Now. Before 9. He's got a full calendar. Theo took a sip. You don't need to come. It's just signatures. She looked at him for a moment, not suspiciously, just assessing, the way she assessed most things before moving on. Then she went back to her phone. Okay. I've got a showing at 10 anyway. I'll be back before that. She didn't look up again. First Commonwealth opened at 8:30. Theo was in the parking lot at 8:22. He sat in the truck and watched the branch lights come on through the glass doors, the security guard unlocking the entrance, the first teller stepping behind the counter. He waited. At 8:31, he went inside. Patrice was at the same window. She looked up when he approached, and something passed across her face. Recognition, and something quieter behind it. Relief, maybe. Or resolve. "Good morning," she said. "Morning." He set his hands on the counter. "I need to request account records. Full statements, both joint and individual, under my name." She nodded, very slightly. "You're a named account holder. You have every right to request that." "I know." She held his gaze for just a beat. "I'll get you started with the forms." She could not tell him anything directly. He understood that. She was a bank employee, and there were rules about what she could say, and to whom. But she had already told him the one thing that mattered yesterday, and today she was giving him the tool to find the rest himself. That was all he needed from her. He filled out the request forms at the counter. She processed them without small talk. The records were delivered as a digital file to his secure bank login within 20 minutes. He thanked her and walked out. He sat in the truck and opened his phone. He logged into the account portal and pulled up the full records. He started with the joint statements, 3 years, just like he'd planned, scanning the columns with the same calm he brought to any set of numbers. His eyes moved down the rows. Deposits, withdrawals, dates. Nothing unusual there, not at first. Then he found it. A secondary account. Opened 37 months ago. Not the joint account. Not his business account. A separate account, held individually, under Bernie's name alone, but linked to the same household profile, which was why it had surfaced in the request at all. He stared at the screen. The deposits were regular. Spaced out, never round numbers, always landing within a week of the dates Bernie typically received her commission checks. 11 deposits over 3 years. The balance had grown quietly, patiently, the way a person grows something they don't want anyone to notice. The total sitting in that account was $62,000. He scrolled to the withdrawals. There were 4 of them. Large, each one landing on a date that meant nothing to him. No payee name, just transfer notations with reference numbers he didn't recognize. He sat back in the seat. Outside the windshield, the parking lot was bright and still. A woman pushed a stroller past the entrance. A delivery truck idled at the corner. The world kept moving, indifferent. Theo closed the banking app. He placed his phone face down on the passenger seat and sat with both hands on his thighs, breathing slowly, looking at nothing. He did not call Bernie. He did not call Imani. He did not call anyone. The picture was not clear yet. He would wait until it was. The dinner had been good. That was the part that stuck with him. Bernie had made her baked chicken, the one with the lemon and the herbs that Imani always asked for when she came home. The kitchen had smelled warm and familiar. Imani had sat at the table and talked about her summer internship, her hands moving the way they always did when she was excited. And Bernie had laughed at something she said, a real laugh, the kind that crinkled the corners of her eyes. Theo had sat at the head of the table and eaten his chicken and asked follow-up questions and refilled his glass twice. He had been present. He had been normal. He was very good at normal. After dinner, he helped clear the plates. He kissed Bernie on the cheek when she took over the dishes. He told Imani her story about her supervisor was funny because it was. He did all of it without effort because it wasn't performance. Not exactly. It was discipline. There was a difference. Around 9, He told Bernie he had some invoices to sort in the garage office. She waved him off without looking up from the sink. He walked through the side door and pulled it shut behind him. The garage office was his real space. Not the house, not the job sites, not the truck. This was where he thought. It was a converted bay, half the double garage, separated by a partition wall he'd built himself 8 years ago. A metal desk, a file cabinet, a corkboard covered in job timelines and vendor contacts, a space heater in the corner that he ran year-round because the concrete floor stayed cold no matter the season, a mini fridge with 2 cans of ginger ale that had been in there since February. He sat down, opened one of the cans, and called Otis Green. It rang twice. Theo. Otis's voice was the same as always, low, unhurried, like a man who had decided long ago that nothing was worth raising his voice over. "I need your eyes on something." A short pause. "Talk to me." That was it. "Know what happened, or is everything okay? Just talk to me." That was Otis. 26 years since they'd shipped out together, and the man still operated on the same frequency. Cut the preamble, get to the information, figure out what needs to be done. Theo had pulled Otis out of a culvert outside Kandahar with a dislocated shoulder and 2 broken ribs in 2003. Otis had pulled Theo out of a financial hole in 2011 when the flooring business nearly folded in the recession. Not with money, but with information. He'd found the clause in a supplier contract that Theo's lawyer had missed, just dug it up, quiet and clean, and handed it over. That was the thing about Otis. He found things. Theo laid it out. All of it. The bank visit, the refinance meeting, Patrice and her 4 words. The secondary account, the $62,000, the deposits timed with the commission checks, the 4 large withdrawals going somewhere he couldn't trace. He said it plainly, the way he'd say anything. No editorializing, no anger in his voice. Just facts, in order. When he finished, the line was quiet for a moment. "How long ago did the account open?" Otis asked. 37 months. Another pause. "And you're sure about the deposit timing?" "I ran it against her commission schedule twice." Otis made a sound that wasn't quite agreement, but was close to it. "What's the name on the account?" "Her name only. Bernadette Whitfield." "Brokerage?" "Desmond Foster's outfit. She's been with him 5 years." Otis was quiet again. Theo could hear him writing something down. A real pen on real paper, the way Otis always worked. Never typed his notes first. Said keyboards made people sloppy. "I'll pull public records," Otis said. "Property filings. Any LLC activity tied to her name or her brokerage. I'll go back 4 years to be safe." "Quiet," Theo said. "She can't know." "Have I ever been loud?" Theo almost smiled. "No. Give me a few days. I'll call when I have something." That was the end of the call. 4 minutes, maybe 5. No reassurances. No, "I'm sorry, man," or "That's rough." Just the work. Theo appreciated that more than he could have explained to anyone who hadn't served with Otis Green. The next 4 days moved the way all his hardest days moved. On the surface, smooth and unremarkable. He took Bernie to dinner on Wednesday, her choice of restaurant. He drove Imani to meet a friend on Thursday afternoon, and waited in the parking lot without complaint. He finished a bid proposal on Friday morning for a hotel job downtown. He came home in the evenings, ate well, and slept badly. Bernie gave him nothing new. No hushed calls he could hear, no unusual exits. She was warm, present, ordinary, which meant nothing. He already knew she was good at ordinary. He just kept moving, kept gathering. Then, Saturday morning, while he was in the garage with a second cup of coffee, his phone buzzed on the desk. "Otis." He picked up. "What did you find?" 18 months ago, Otis said. "Your wife co-purchased a condo on the east side of the city, registered under an LLC." He paused. Co-signer on the LLC paperwork is a Desmond Foster. Theo set down his coffee cup. "She bought property." he said. Yes, with her broker. Yes. He stood very still in the cold garage, the space heater humming behind him, the corkboard full of job timelines on the wall in front of him. The numbers from the account, the 4 withdrawals going somewhere he didn't recognize. They had somewhere to go now. This wasn't hidden money anymore. This was something else entirely. 2 weeks. That was how long Theo held it together without cracking. 14 days of dinners and small talk and weekend errands, all while the thing he knew sat quiet and heavy in his chest, like a stone he'd swallowed whole. He was good at carrying weight. Always had been. On the first Saturday, he took Bernie to the farmer's market on Clement Street. Her idea, originally, something she'd mentioned wanting to do before summer ended. He carried the canvas bag. He tasted the honey samples. He stood beside her at the flower stall and agreed that the sunflowers were nice. She looped her arm through his on the walk back to the car, and he let her, and the whole time he was thinking about the LLC paperwork Otis had sent to his work email at 6 that morning. The following Wednesday, they got takeout from the Thai place Bernie liked. She talked about a new listing she was staging, a colonial on the north side with original hardwood floors. She asked him what he thought about refinishing the kitchen floors at home. The color's getting tired, she said. Probably right, he said. She smiled at him over her chopsticks, easy and warm, and he thought about how good she was at this. The performance, the ordinary. He'd been impressed by it once. Now it just told him something about her he wished he didn't know. Otis was working fast. They met twice after hours in the parking lot behind Otis's office on Halsted, a gray brick building sandwiched between a copy shop and a tax prep place that seemed to be closed year-round. Otis would bring a folder. Theo would bring 2 coffees. They'd sit in Theo's truck and go through it like they were reviewing job specs. The documentation was growing. Property records, LLC filings, bank routing patterns, a timeline that Otis had laid out in his careful, block-lettered handwriting on a legal pad, each entry dated and sourced. She's meticulous, Otis said one evening, turning a page. I'll give her that. She always was, Theo said. It wasn't pride. It was just a fact. At home, Bernie was starting to slip. Small things, easy to miss if you weren't paying attention. The back porch light clicked on Tuesday night around 10, and when Theo looked out through the kitchen window, she was standing near the railing with her phone pressed to her ear, her back to the house. The call lasted 11 minutes. When she came back inside, she said she'd been talking to a client about a showing. She was still in her pajamas. He didn't say anything. He just noted it. 3 days later, her phone buzzed at the dinner table, and she flipped it face down before Imani had even finished her sentence. Bernie picked right back up with the conversation like nothing happened, smooth and quick about it. But Theo had seen her face in the half-second before she covered the screen. That brief flicker. The kind of look a person didn't know they were making. Imani saw it too. He could tell by the way her eyes moved from the phone to her mother, and back to her plate. Later that week, after Bernie had gone to bed, Theo was cleaning up the kitchen when Imani came down for a glass of water. She leaned against the counter and looked at him for a moment, quiet, the way she got when she was working something out. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Sure. You doing okay?" "Like, with Mom." He looked at her. She had his eyes, that same steady, watchful quality that people sometimes found unsettling. "What makes you ask?" She shrugged, but it wasn't casual. "She's been a little off lately. I don't know. Distracted." He rinsed a dish and set it in the rack. "You noticed that?" "Kind of hard not to." She paused. "Is everything okay between you two?" "Why wouldn't it be?" She looked at him for a long moment. "Okay." That wasn't an answer. He almost smiled. "Your mom's probably just got a busy quarter. Real estate's been moving fast this year." Imani was quiet. Then, "She's my mom. I know when something's off with her." A beat. "But I also know she'd tell me if something was really wrong." There it was. The loyalty. Gentle, sincere, unshakable. She wasn't defending Bernie against him. She wasn't even sure there was anything to defend against. She just believed in her mother, fully and without question. That belief would cost her something. He just didn't know how to protect her from it yet, without destroying it himself. "I hear you," he said. She looked at him a second longer, then took her water and went back upstairs. The kitchen was quiet. Theo stood at the sink, his hands wet, and said nothing to no one. 2 days later, Otis called him before 7 in the morning. "I need you to come by the office." Theo knew the tone. He'd heard it before. Not alarm, but wait. The sound of a man who'd found something that changed the shape of a thing. "When?" "Tonight. After 6. Bring your reading glasses." They sat in the truck as the streetlights came on. Otis had brought a thick folder, rubber-banded twice. He pulled out a stack of documents and laid them across the center console, transaction records, and beneath them, official-looking forms filled with dense legal language and formatted columns. "Closing disclosures," Otis said. 6 of them, spanning 2 years. Theo picked up the first one. His eyes moved down the page the way they always did on financial paperwork. Methodical, systematic, looking for what didn't line up. It didn't take long. "These numbers don't match," he said. "No," Otis said. "They don't. The fees listed on the client-facing version are different from the ones on the internal brokerage copies. The gap between them. That's money that went somewhere that wasn't disclosed." Theo set that form down and picked up the next. Same thing. A number that didn't belong, buried in the middle of a line item that most buyers would never read closely enough to question. "She's been skimming from clients," Theo said. "From the closing table," Otis said. "Home buyers, real people. 6 transactions confirmed so far. Possibly more." He tapped the bottom of the page. "Now look at the approval signature on each one." Theo looked. Desmond Foster, supervising broker. Every single form. His signature, clear and deliberate, authorizing each one. Theo sat back in the seat and let out a slow breath through his nose. He had come into this, looking for the truth about his marriage. What he was holding now was something bigger than that, something colder. Real people had sat at closing tables, signed the most important documents of their lives, and been quietly robbed. And the 2 people who'd done it had both gone home that evening and acted like nothing happened. This wasn't just his problem anymore. The trap was simple. That was what made it elegant. Theo had learned something early in his business life, long before he had employees or contracts or a commercial account worth protecting. He'd learned it the hard way, from a supplier who'd been shorting his material orders for 8 months before Theo noticed the weight discrepancy in a delivery. He hadn't confronted the man right away. He'd placed one more order, watched what happened. And the supplier, feeling safe, did it again. Bigger this time. Bolder, because he believed Theo wasn't paying attention. That was what comfort did to people. It made them careless. He brought it up on a Thursday evening. Nothing dramatic about it. Just dinner. Baked chicken, roasted potatoes, the kind of meal Bernie made when she wasn't trying too hard. And the 3 of them at the table with the television off, and the evening coming in through the windows. "I've been in some talks lately," Theo said. He reached for the serving spoon. "About the business." Bernie looked up from her plate. Imani kept eating. "What kind of talks?" Bernie said. "Regional buyer. Commercial flooring company out of Columbus." He served himself more potatoes, easy and unhurried. "Good offer. Solid numbers. I've been going back and forth on it." "Selling?" Bernie said. "Thinking about it. Haven't decided yet." He took a bite. "But if it goes through, I'd want to consolidate our finances before year-end. Get everything into one account. Make it clean." He said it just like that. One account. Then he picked up his water glass and watched her over the rim. She didn't take 3 seconds to respond. "I can handle that," she said. Her voice was smooth, easy, but her fork had stopped moving. The consolidation. I deal with accounts all the time through the agency. I know exactly how to set that up efficiently. I wasn't worried about efficiency, Theo said mildly. No, I know. She smiled. I just mean it makes sense for me to take the lead on it. You'd be busy with the sale details anyway. A small pause. How much are we talking, if you don't mind me asking? He gave her a number. A real one, close enough to be believable. Her smile didn't waver, but something behind her eyes did. Just a flicker. The same kind of flicker he'd noticed at the dinner table 3 weeks ago when her phone buzzed. That's significant, she said. Yeah, he said. It is. Imani glanced between them, then went back to her chicken. The days that followed were different. Bernie had always been controlled, measured. Even when she was being careless, there was a kind of practiced smoothness to it. The hushed call, the flipped phone, the easy excuse ready before he could ask. But now, something in her tempo had shifted. She was moving faster, like a woman who'd just seen the clock and realized she was behind. The porch calls started happening in the mornings, too, not just at night. She began closing the bedroom door to take calls that used to happen in the open. She started asking Theo questions she'd never cared about before. When exactly the Columbus meeting was scheduled, whether he'd spoken to his accountant yet, how soon the wire transfer would happen once the deal closed. He answered each one calmly and said nothing more than she needed to hear. It was a Sunday evening when he heard it. He'd come in through the side door from the garage, quiet, out of habit, and stopped in the hallway when he caught the sound of Bernie's voice through the back screen door. Low, focused, the voice she used when she wasn't performing. He didn't move. I know. But this changes the timing, she was saying. If that money moves into a joint account, I lose access to everything. I need to be gone before that happens. A pause. She was listening. Within the month, Desmond. I mean it. Her voice dropped lower, but not low enough. And I'm moving Imani's college fund into the other account. Before I go. Just for safekeeping. She'll get it eventually. She'll understand. Theo stood in the hallway. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere upstairs, the floor creaked. She'll get it eventually. He didn't move. He didn't breathe wrong. He stood there and let every word land exactly where it was going to land, because there was nothing he could do to stop it from landing, and flinching would not change the weight of it. His daughter's tuition. The account he and Bernie had built over years, contribution by careful contribution, because Imani deserved to finish school without debt. Already spent in his wife's mind. Already redirected. Already gone. Not to some emergency, not to some need, but to a getaway fund for a woman who had decided her own comfort was worth more than her daughter's future. He heard Bernie laugh softly at something Desmond said. Then the call ended. He walked quietly back through the hallway and into his office and closed the door behind him. He sat down at his desk. He picked up his phone. Otis answered on the second ring. We need to move, Theo said. His voice was steady. Not just gathering anymore. We're building the case now. All the way. The documents spread across Otis's desk like a map of something rotten. Bank statements, LLC filings, closing disclosures with numbers that didn't line up. A printout of the condo registration, Desmond Foster's name right there beside the LLC. Clean as a signature on a contract he thought no one would ever read. Otis had laid it all out in order. That was his way. Methodical, no wasted motion, same as when they'd served together, and he'd been the one who kept inventory of their unit's equipment down to the last bolt. He didn't get emotional about any of it. He just organized it, labeled it, and let it speak. Theo sat across from him and read everything twice. The bank records came first. 3 years of deposits into the secondary account, each one arriving within days of Bernie's commission checks clearing. Not a coincidence, a pattern, a careful, practiced rhythm that someone had worked out ahead of time and then repeated until it became invisible. $83,000, spread across 31 months. Theo had built his flooring business with less than that as a starting point. He knew exactly what that number meant. It meant she hadn't just been skimming. She'd been planning. The LLC paperwork was next. Sunny Crest Properties, LLC. Registered 18 months ago in the county where Bernie worked most of her deals. 2 members listed, Bernadette M. Whitfield and Desmond A. Foster. The condo, a 2-bedroom unit on the east side, purchased for $212,000, registered under that entity. Desmond's brokerage listed as the managing office. Theo set that page down slowly. He picked up the next one. The falsified disclosures were the worst of it. Not because of what they meant for his marriage, that wound was already cauterized, but because of what they meant for the people who'd had no part in any of this. Real buyers. Real families, probably. People who'd trusted a real estate agent to handle the biggest financial decision of their lives, and who had walked away from their closings paying fees they hadn't agreed to. Their money quietly redirected before the ink was dry. Desmond's signature was on every one of them. His broker approval stamp in the upper right corner, neat and authoritative, the same signature you'd see on any legitimate disclosure form. He knew exactly what he was signing, Otis said from across the desk. "I know," Theo said. He didn't need to say anything else. Marguerite Okafor Lewis worked out of a small office on the 3rd floor of a building downtown. The kind of place with good natural light and framed certifications lined up so clients could see them without having to look for them. Patrice had passed Theo her name through a short text. "My cousin handles real estate compliance. She can point you in the right direction." And that had been that. Marguerite was sharp and direct and didn't waste his time. She looked at the documents Theo had brought for about 15 minutes before she spoke. "You have enough to file a formal complaint with the State Real Estate Commission," she said. "Both of them. Your wife and the supervising broker. They'll open an investigation. Licenses can be suspended while that's ongoing. How long does it take? For the filing to be received? Days. For the investigation to run its full course? Longer." She set down the disclosure form she'd been holding. "But here's what matters for you right now. Once the complaint is filed, it becomes a matter of official record. This stops being a husband's accusation. It becomes a documented fraud case." That was exactly what Theo needed to hear. She walked him through the structure of the complaint form, what language to use, what exhibits to attach, and in what order. She explained how to submit the bank account records to the bank's own fraud department separately, and why doing both in the same week would create 2 independent investigations running parallel. Harder to dismiss, harder to slow down, harder for either Bernie or Desmond to get ahead of. He took notes in his small, neat handwriting. He asked 3 questions, all of them specific. She answered each one without hesitation. When he stood to leave, she said, "Whoever told you to come here, they gave you good advice." "She usually does," Theo said. He spent the next 2 evenings at his desk. The complaint documents went together carefully, page by page. He checked the exhibit numbers twice. He cross-referenced the LLC filing against the bank records, the falsified disclosures against the commission dates, the recorded call against the timeline Otis had assembled. Every piece pointed at the same thing. Every piece was real. He sealed the envelope for the Real Estate Commission on a Wednesday night. He drafted the fraud department submission for the bank on Thursday and saved it to send Friday morning. On Friday afternoon, he found Bernie in the kitchen and said it simply. "I was thinking we should do a family dinner this weekend. The 3 of us." He leaned against the counter. "Sit down together. Talk about the future." Bernie looked up from her phone and smiled. It was a warm smile, easy and familiar and completely unsuspecting. "I think that sounds really nice," she said. "Good," Theo said. "Saturday, then." The kitchen smelled like garlic and rosemary. Theo had started the chicken at 4 o'clock. He'd made rice the way Imani liked it, with butter and a little lemon. There was a salad in a bowl on the counter, already dressed. He'd set the table with the good plates, not because the occasion called for anything nice, but because it helped him feel steady. Something about doing ordinary things carefully had always helped him think. Bernie came downstairs at 6, wearing a cream blouse and her good earrings. She kissed him on the cheek, without pausing. "Smells good," she said. "Should be ready in 20 minutes, Theo said. He didn't look at her. Imani came in from the backyard, still in her shorts and a college t-shirt, her natural hair pulled back in a loose puff. She'd been on the phone with one of her friends, laughing at something, and she was still smiling when she pulled out her chair and sat down. "Did you make the rice the way I like it?" "Butter and lemon," Theo said. She grinned. "That's why you're my favorite." Bernie said something from the other side of the table, and Imani laughed, and for a moment the kitchen sounded like every other Saturday they'd ever had. Dishes on the counter, the low hum of the refrigerator, the sound of his two favorite people talking about nothing in particular. Theo set the serving dish on the table and sat down. He let them fill their plates. He let the conversation run for a few minutes. Imani talking about a professor she wasn't sure she liked, Bernie nodding and offering opinions. Ordinary, easy, completely comfortable. Then Theo reached under his chair and brought up a thin manila folder. He set it flat on the table beside his plate without opening it. The conversation stopped. Bernie looked at the folder. Her smile didn't disappear right away. It just went still. "Bernie," Theo said, "I need to walk you through some things. I want Imani here for this." "Theo, I'm going to be calm," he said. "I'm asking you to let me finish before you speak." Bernie set her fork down. Her jaw tightened for just a moment, then she smoothed it back out. The performer in her reasserting itself, fast. Imani looked between them. She didn't say anything. Theo opened the folder. He started with the account. He placed the bank statement on the table, turned so Bernie could read it. He didn't wave it at her. He just put it there, the way you'd put a receipt on a counter. "3 years ago, you opened a secondary account I had no knowledge of," he said. $83,000 deposited over 31 months. Each deposit arrived within days of your commission checks clearing. He tapped the column of dates. "I pulled these records myself. Legally, under my name. This is real." Bernie opened her mouth. "Let me finish," he said. His voice didn't rise. She closed it. He laid the next page down. The LLC filing, Sunny Crest Properties, her name, Desmond's name. "You co-purchased a condo 18 months ago," he said. "Desmond Foster co-signed the LLC that owns it. You used funds from this account to do it. I never knew this property existed until 3 weeks ago." He heard Imani draw a breath. He kept his eyes on Bernie. "Theo." Bernie's voice was quiet, controlled. "I don't know what you think you're looking at, but you're twisting. I haven't asked you a question yet," he said. "When I do, you'll know." He placed the falsified disclosures next. 4 pages, each one with Desmond's approval stamp in the upper right corner, each one showing fees that didn't match the corresponding client contracts. He didn't explain them in detail. He just let them sit there. "Those are from clients," he said. "Real people who trusted you. Those fees were redirected without their knowledge. Desmond signed off on every one of them." The table was very quiet. Then he reached back into the folder and removed the last page, a printed transcription. He placed it directly in front of Bernie. "I heard this on the back porch about 10 days ago," he said. "You were on the phone. I was standing in the hallway." He looked at her steadily. "You told Desmond you were leaving within the month. You said you were going to move Imani's college fund into the hidden account for safekeeping. Your word." Imani made a sound like the air had left her body. Bernie shot a look across the table. Fast. Reflex. The look of someone who'd just been caught in the middle of 2 places at once. Then she turned back to Theo, and her voice shifted. Softer now. Urgent. "This is about us," she said. Whatever problems we have in this marriage, that's what this is really about. You're framing money to avoid talking about what's actually Imani's college fund, Theo said. He didn't raise his voice. He just let the words land. That wasn't a marriage problem. That was her future. And you planned to take it. Bernie said nothing. Imani still hadn't spoken. She was staring at the transcription on the table like she was reading it for the second time. Theo folded his hands. The complaint was filed with the State Real Estate Commission on Friday, he said. Both your name and Desmond's. The bank's fraud department received a separate submission the same morning. 2 independent investigations, Bernie, already open, already on record. He looked at her calmly. This isn't something you can manage. The color left Bernie's face. The call came at 8:47 in the morning. Bernie was still in her robe. She had a mug of coffee in her hand, and she was standing at the kitchen window, looking out at the backyard, when her phone buzzed on the counter. She picked it up without thinking. Is this Bernadette Whitfield? The voice was professional, flat. The kind of voice that didn't belong on a Sunday morning. Yes, she said slowly. This is the Office of Real Estate Licensing and Compliance. I'm calling to inform you that a formal investigation has been opened against your license based on documentation submitted to this office. You should expect written notice by end of business today. In the meantime, you are required to… Bernie set the coffee mug down. It knocked against the counter harder than she intended. She didn't hear the rest of the sentence. She was upstairs with the door locked before she even realized she'd moved. Her fingers were shaking as she pulled up Desmond's number and hit call. 1 ring? 2. He picked up on the 3rd. I already heard, he said. His voice was different. Tight. The easy warmth he usually carried was completely gone. Stripped out. And what was left underneath was something cold and focused. Desmond. Her voice cracked slightly on the second syllable. She pressed her hand flat against the bedroom door. You need to tell them it was an accounting issue, a processing error on the disclosures, something administrative. If you go in there and explain that the system… Bernie, he cut her off cleanly. Stop! I'm not going to stop. This is both of us. You signed those… I know what I signed. A pause. The silence between them had a weight to it she hadn't felt before. I have a lawyer, he said. He advised me this morning. I'm cooperating with the investigators. I'm giving them what they need to understand the full scope of what happened at the brokerage. She went very still. What does that mean? She said. Not a question. More like she already knew and was giving him one last chance to say something different. It means I'm protecting myself, Desmond said. That's what this means. The line went quiet again. You would throw me under to save yourself, she said. I would tell the truth, he said. And the way he said it, smooth, practiced, the same voice he used with difficult clients, made her stomach turn. She stood there for another moment. Then she ended the call. What Desmond handed over that afternoon arrived at the investigator's office in a neat digital submission. 3 years of internal brokerage records, organized by transaction date, flagged for review of individual agent conduct. His attorney had packaged it efficiently. It looked like the work of a man with nothing to hide. The investigator opened the first file, then the second. By the 4th file, she had stopped taking notes and was simply reading. Because there it was, on every flagged disclosure form. D. Foster, supervising broker, approved. His stamp, his initials beside the altered fee columns. Not once, not twice. 11 separate transactions across 22 months, each one bearing his authorization. And in the LLC documentation submitted alongside the brokerage records, the same records Desmond had handed over himself, his name appeared as co-signer on Sunnycrest Properties, his signature on the purchase agreement, his address listed as the registered agent. He had handed them a case against Bernie. He had also handed them a case against himself. By 6 o'clock that evening, the second call had been made. Desmond was in his car outside his office building when his phone rang. He looked at the screen. The compliance office number. He let out a slow breath and answered. It took less than 4 minutes. His license was suspended, effective immediately, pending the outcome of the investigation. The investigator's tone was the same flat professionalism Bernie had heard that morning. No anger in it, no satisfaction either. Just the clean, procedural weight of a decision already made. Desmond sat in his car for a long time after the call ended. Bernie was at the kitchen table when her own phone rang again. She answered before she saw the number, thinking it might be Desmond calling back. It was the compliance office confirming the suspension of her license in writing, restating what she'd been told that morning, making it official. She set the phone face down on the table. The kitchen was very quiet. Theo's dishes from the night before were still drying in the rack by the sink. The good plates, the ones he'd used to help himself stay steady while he took her whole world apart. She picked her phone back up and called Desmond. It rang 4 times, then 5. Then the voicemail picked up. His voice, professional, unhurried. "You've reached Desmond Foster. Please leave a message, and I'll return your call at my earliest convenience." And Bernie sat there listening to it until the beep sounded. She didn't leave a message. She called again. It rang once, then went straight to voicemail. He had declined it. She put the phone down on the table in front of her and looked at it for a long time. Theo was at the kitchen table when Imani came downstairs. It was a little past 7. The sun had dropped below the tree line, and the kitchen light was on, casting everything in a warm yellow glow that felt strange given the week they'd had. Theo had a cup of coffee in front of him and a folder he wasn't reading. He'd been sitting there for almost 20 minutes, not doing much of anything except being present. Imani pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. She was still wearing the clothes she'd had on all day. A gray sweatshirt, jeans, her hair pulled back. She looked tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes. The other kind. "I talked to her," she said. Theo looked up. "Tonight?" he asked. "An hour ago. In the living room." Imani wrapped both hands around the mug she'd brought down with her. "I asked her to explain it to me. All of it." She paused. I needed to hear her say it herself. Theo didn't ask what Bernie had said. He waited. Imani looked down at the table. "I asked her why she was going to take my college fund." Her voice was even, but her jaw tightened. "I told her I heard what Dad laid out at dinner, that I'd seen the paperwork. And I asked her, just her and me, nobody else in the room, why she would do that." The living room had been quiet when Imani sat across from her mother. Bernie had composed herself by then. The panic from the morning was still there somewhere underneath, but she'd arranged her expression into something softer, something that looked like sorrow. "Baby," Bernie had said, "you don't understand the full picture." "Then explain it to me," Imani said. "I'm asking you to." Bernie had looked at her hands for a moment. Then she started talking. It came out practiced, even if Bernie didn't mean it to sound that way. She said she'd felt invisible in the marriage for years, that Theo was always working, always focused on the business, and she had quietly built her own career from nothing with no one cheering for her. She said she'd felt trapped, that she and Desmond had connected in a way she hadn't felt in a long time, and that the money, the account, the condo, was her way of making sure she had something of her own if everything fell apart. "I wasn't going to leave you with nothing," Bernie said. "The college fund was going to be protected." Imani looked at her mother. "You were going to move it without telling me or Dad. I was going to keep it safe. In an account I didn't know existed," Imani said. "With a man I've never met." Bernie's expression shifted, just slightly. "Your father doesn't understand what it's like to feel." "Mom!" Imani's voice wasn't loud. It was flat. "I'm not asking about Dad right now. I'm asking about me. I'm asking why my future was something you were willing to use." Bernie opened her mouth, closed it. "I would have made sure you were fine," she said finally. "You don't know that," Imani said, "and the fact that you believe it is what scares me." Imani lifted her eyes from the table now and looked at her father. She said she felt unappreciated, Imani said. She said she felt trapped. She had a whole explanation ready. Her voice was careful, like she was handling something sharp. But she never once said she was sorry. Not for the money. Not for the fund. She shook her head. Not once. Theo was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry you had to hear all of that," he said. "I needed to." Imani pressed her lips together. "I needed to see it for myself." She set her mug down and looked at him directly. "I'm not going back to that dorm until fall," she said. "And I'm not staying in this house with her while everything is the way it is." She paused. "Can I stay with you?" Theo looked at his daughter, the tiredness around her eyes, the steadiness in them despite it, and nodded once. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Of course you can." Imani packed a bag while Bernie sat in the living room. She didn't pack everything, just enough. A week's worth of clothes, her laptop, the small framed photo she kept on her nightstand, Theo at one of her high school track meets, grinning, holding a sign he'd made himself out of cardboard and blue marker. She came downstairs with the bag over her shoulder and stopped in the doorway of the living room. Bernie was on the couch. She looked up when she heard Imani stop. "I need some space," Imani said. "I'm going to stay with Dad for a while." Bernie's mouth opened. For a second it looked like she might say something that mattered. Then it closed again. "Okay," was all she said. Imani nodded once. Then she walked out. The house got very quiet after the front door shut. Bernie sat on the couch for a long time without moving. The television was off. The lights in the hallway were still on from when Imani had come downstairs. She looked at the empty doorway. Then she looked around the room. The good plates were still in the rack by the kitchen sink. Theo's coffee mug from that morning was on the counter. Imani's throw blanket was folded over the arm of the chair where she always left it. Everything was exactly where it had always been, and Bernie sat in the middle of all of it, completely alone. The letter from the State Real Estate Commission arrived on a Tuesday. Bernie signed for it herself. Theo knew because Otis had a contact at the courier service. He didn't need to be there to watch it happen. He already knew what was inside. Her license was revoked. Not suspended. Not under review. Revoked. Effective immediately, pending the outcome of the broader fraud inquiry, which the Commission had now expanded to include a full audit of every closing Bernie had touched in the last 4 years. The hidden account was frozen 3 days later. The bank's fraud department moved quietly but fast once the Commission filing gave them what they needed. The condo, the one tucked inside the LLC, the one Theo had never seen and Bernie had never mentioned, was frozen alongside it as a co-mingled asset tied to the investigation. Desmond's name was on both. Neither of them could touch any of it. The divorce settlement came 6 weeks after that. Theo's attorney presented the documentation the same way Theo had at that dinner table. Without theater, without anger, just fact after fact laid flat on a conference room table. Bernie's attorney didn't have much to argue against. The records were clean and complete. The recorded admission about Imani's college fund sat in that file like a stone. Bernie walked out of that settlement with considerably less than she had walked into the marriage expecting to keep. Imani's college fund was untouched. Her tuition was secured through her junior year. Theo signed the final paperwork on a Thursday afternoon and drove straight to a job site in the east end of the city, where his crew was finishing up a commercial tile install in a new medical office building. He pulled on his boots, walked the floor with his foreman, and stayed until the last panel was down. Desmond didn't fare better. He fared worse. His brokerage fired him within 10 days of the Commission opening the investigation. They didn't call it a firing in the press release. They called it a mutual separation effective immediately. But everyone in that industry understood what it meant. The brokerage had retained outside counsel within 48 hours of the investigator's first visit, and outside counsel's first recommendation had been to put distance between the firm and Desmond Foster as fast as legally possible. His license was revoked the same week as Bernie's. But the falsified client disclosures were a different problem entirely, bigger than either of them had anticipated when they were busy being careful about everything else. Because those weren't just paperwork violations between two people. Those were real clients. Families who had paid fees they were never told about, signed documents that didn't say what they should have said, trusted a process that had been quietly manipulated around them. The State Commission referred the disclosure fraud to a broader regulatory body for review. Desmond's attorney sent 3 emails to Theo's attorney over the course of a month. Theo's attorney responded to none of them. The last thing Theo heard, through Otis, was that Desmond was managing the cost of his legal defense on his own, because the brokerage's coverage didn't extend to conduct they had publicly distanced themselves from. The expensive suits, and the polished office, and the reputation he'd spent 2 decades constructing had cost him more to defend than he had left to protect. Nobody called to check on him. Nobody in the industry went on record saying a kind word. 18 months later, Theo's second location opened in a city 40 minutes north. It wasn't a franchise. It wasn't a partnership. It was his. Same name, same standards. A second crew he'd trained himself. The ribbon cutting was small. A handshake with the building's property manager, a few photos for the company's website, coffee and paper cups standing in a half-finished lobby that still smelled like fresh adhesive and concrete dust. Imani was there. She'd been working summers with the company since the spring, learning the estimating side first, then moving to site walkthroughs with the project leads. She had her father's eye for detail and enough of his patience to ask questions before she formed opinions. The crew liked her. She wasn't there because she was the boss's daughter. She was there because she showed up on time and did the work. She stood next to Theo in that lobby and looked out at the floor they'd just finished. Large format tile, clean grout lines, not a single lippage, and said, "You leveled this whole subfloor yourself, didn't you?" "Somebody had to," Theo said. Imani shook her head, but she was smiling. The community block event was held on a Saturday in late September, 2 weeks after the second location opened. Theo was there because his company had sponsored the food stations on the North End. A small thing, not a big gesture, just a way of being present in the neighborhood where he'd grown up and where his original shop still sat on a corner lot off the main street. He was refilling his plate when he saw Patrice Okafor across the crowd. She was with a group of women near the far table, laughing at something. She looked exactly the same as the day he'd first sat across from her at that bank counter. Steady, sharp-eyed, the kind of person who seemed like she was always paying attention even when she looked relaxed. She glanced over and saw him. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Theo gave her a single nod, slow and deliberate, the kind that didn't need a word behind it. Patrice held his gaze for just a moment, then nodded back. Same wait. Same quiet understanding. That was all. He locked up his truck at the job site the following Monday morning. The sun was still low, just clearing the roofline of the building across the street. His breath showed faintly in the cool air. The city was waking up around him. Engines, voices, the distant sound of a loading dock somewhere down the block. Theo pocketed his keys and stood there for a moment, not thinking about Bernie, not thinking about Desmond, not thinking about the account or the condo or the dinner or the paperwork or any of it, just standing there in the cool morning air with work to do. He reached down, picked up his tool bag, and walked toward the door. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.